Alcatraz. Yes, that Alcatraz, the notorious former prison on an island near San Francisco.
The Alcatraz, popularly known as the Inescapable prison rock, had been a home for hardened criminals for years. Later, an escape of 3 inmates proved it otherwise. For decades, their fate remained one of America's biggest mysteries. Now, in 2025, scientists have finally solved the Alcatraz escape mystery. Join us as we reveal what happened that day. The Island of No Escape. Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, also known as Alcatraz or The Rock, was a unique prison located on a small island in San Francisco Bay. The isolated location was intentionally chosen to prevent prisoners from escaping, as the cold and rough waters surrounding the island made escape attempts difficult. If a prisoner attempted to swim away, the strong currents and freezing temperature of the water would likely thwart their efforts. Alcatraz had a different history before it became a prison. Initially, in the 1850s, it served as a military fort. It was later used as a facility to confine military prisoners. However, by 1934, it transformed into a high-security federal prison. This prison was specifically designed for the most dangerous and rebellious inmates who were deemed too disruptive for other prisons. These individuals often caused trouble wherever they were incarcerated, and Alcatraz served as their ultimate destination. If a person was sent to Alcatraz, it was understood that there were no other options available. The prison was created with the goal of maintaining strict control over its inmates. Every aspect of the facility was constructed to ensure the prisoners remained obedient. The main building, which was completed in the early 1900s, included all necessary amenities, such as small individual cells, a dining area, a hospital, a library, and accommodations for guards and staff members. The cells were cramped and chilly, featuring sturdy steel bars that were impossible to manipulate. The prisoners were under constant surveillance, with guards routinely performing head counts up to 13 times daily. Security was a top priority at the facility. There were armed guards overseeing the cell blocks from above. Metal detectors were used to screen everyone entering. Behavior determined whether prisoners could work, receive visitors, or have any privileges. Misbehaving meant losing out on these benefits. Alcatraz housed some of the most notorious criminals in American history, such as Al Capone and Machine Gun Kelly. These gangsters were kept in a highly controlled environment. The most dangerous inmates were placed in D Block, where they faced solitary confinement in dark, empty cells known as the Hole. Prisoners in the Hole spent their days isolated and in darkness. At Alcatraz, the main focus wasn't on helping prisoners rehabilitate. The prison kept upgrading its security systems by installing electric fences and stronger locks. Despite these upgrades, the salt air and ocean water gradually deteriorated the buildings. By the 1960s, the cost of maintaining the facility became too high. As a result, on March 21, 1963, Alcatraz was officially closed down. However, the narrative did not conclude at that point. At present, the island is accessible to the general public. Administered by the National Park Service, it attracts more than 1 million tourists annually. Visitors arrive to explore the chilly corridors, view the small cells, and envision the experiences of the inmates. Despite no longer functioning as a correctional facility, Alcatraz continues to exude a strong aura. Its history remains apparent in the architecture, the sounds of footsteps, and the narratives shared regularly. Alcatraz, although closed for many years, is still remembered and talked about. Let us dive into the history of Frank Morris, the clever mind behind the escape. The ingenious escape of Frank Morris. Frank Morris was not just an average prisoner. He was clever and had a history of successful escapes. Alcatraz was chosen as his prison because of its reputation for being impossible to escape from. Despite its nickname, The Rock, which suggested that no one could leave, Morris saw it as a challenge he could overcome. His childhood was difficult. He became an orphan when he was only 11. At 13, he had already been found guilty of minor offenses. He went from one foster family to another without ever feeling at home. These unstable years made him strong and vigilant, prepared for whatever challenges came his way. Frank led a criminal life that was always intense. He committed armed robberies and got in trouble for having illegal substances. He escaped from state prisons multiple times, earning a reputation as a skilled escape artist. In January 1960, he was sent to Alcatraz after running away from the Louisiana State Penitentiary. Authorities thought that Alcatraz would be able to hold him securely for good. On Alcatraz, Frank saw some people he knew. John and Clarence Anglin, two brothers he had known previously, were in cells next to his. Alan West, another inmate who always got into trouble, was also part of their group. At night, they talked quietly through the vents, discussing ideas and making plans. Frank naturally took on the role of leader because he was calm, smart, and focused. As they talked more, their plans started to come together. The team was aware that they had a difficult job ahead of them. The walls of their cells were sturdy and thick. However, due to the salty sea air, the concrete under the sink vents had become soft. They spent several months slowly working on it. They used metal spoons borrowed from the kitchen and found saw blades that had been thrown away. Using these basic tools, they chipped away at the soft concrete, creating a hidden tunnel behind their cells. They made a small drill with parts from a vacuum cleaner motor, metal pieces, and tape. Every night they used a hidden socket near the floor to power the drill. To conceal their activities, they made fake vent covers out of papier-mâché. They painted the covers with colors they stole from the library and workshop to blend in. During the day, they kept the covers on so no guard would notice anything suspicious. Noise was a problem for them. If they made a loud scraping noise on the concrete, it would have alerted all the guards on the island. Frank came up with a clever idea. He played his accordion during music hour for the other prisoners. The creaky, airy notes from the instrument masked the sound of their drilling. The guards liked the music and had no idea it was covering up an escape plan. They were prepared for the next step by the time they made a large enough hole to escape through. They collected over 50 raincoats, sliced them into pieces, and stitched them together to create a big raft that could hold all three of them. They also made life jackets out of the same raincoats. In order to waterproof the raft, they sealed the seams using hot steam pipes in a maintenance room. They repurposed a small concertina, which Frank had brought to music hour, into an air pump to help keep them floating. On a foggy evening, Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers escaped from their cell through a hole. They climbed walls and roofs to get to the edge of the island. They used a yellow raft to float away in the dark without being noticed by guards. They paddled into the bay, vanishing into the fog. In the morning, the guards discovered that the bunks were empty. The sea was peaceful, and there were no bodies found on the shore. Some people thought that the men had drowned. Others believed that they had escaped to start fresh lives. Many years later, a mysterious letter suggested that Frank Morris might have lived under a different identity. The truth remains unknown. The smartest escape in the history of Alcatraz was definitely successful. Frank Morris demonstrated that even the most secure prison could be overcome with a clever and bold plan. Despite the towering walls of Alcatraz, his determination proved that no fortress is completely impregnable. What could have made the escape plan a success? Could it have been because of the Anglin brothers? A bond stronger than bars. John and Clarence Anglin were more than just prisoners. They were siblings with a strong connection. Growing up in a large family in rural Florida, they were taught to rely on each other to overcome challenges. Despite their difficult upbringing, their bond remained unbreakable. This connection would eventually lead them to attempt a bold escape from prison, which would go down in history as one of the most daring in the United States. Their early years were difficult. They did not have much money, but they always had each other. As they grew older, the Anglin brothers resorted to committing crimes, mainly robbing banks. Their series of robberies eventually led to their capture and imprisonment in the Atlanta Penitentiary. However, the Anglins were restless and attempted to escape multiple times, causing the prison system to transfer them to Alcatraz, known as the Inescapable prison. Despite the challenges, the Anglin brothers believed they could overcome any obstacle, whether it was a wall to climb or a sea to cross. The story started to come together at Alcatraz. That's where they ran into Frank Morris, a clever man they knew from earlier time in prison. They were in cells right next to Morris and another inmate, Alan West. Being so close allowed them to share plans quietly, pass tools, and work together in secret. Morris had the ideas, but the Anglins had the skill and determination to make it happen. The brothers had a methodical plan that took place each night. They used metal spoons and saw blades to dig small holes in the old concrete walls. It was important for them to be cautious and not make noise. They carefully covered each hole with handmade vent covers made of papier-mâché. During the day, they worked at a factory and collected various materials like glue, brushes, rubber scraps, and even hair from the barbershop floor. They made sure to utilize everything they gathered without wasting anything. They worked together to create life jackets and a large raft that could transport them through the cold and treacherous waters surrounding the island. The raft was constructed from more than 50 raincoats, stitched together and sealed with hot steam pipes from the prison. They improvised a hand pump from a stolen concertina to inflate the raft. Their actions were not only clever, but also daring. The final trick involved creating fake heads using soap, toilet paper, and real hair. These were placed on their beds to make it look like they were sleeping when the guards checked on them. There were no alarms or noises that night. Everything was eerily silent. By the next morning, the prisoners had escaped. For a long time, it was thought that the brothers had drowned in the bay and were lost. However, small hints began to appear over time, like Christmas cards sent to their family, a strange photo from Brazil, and a mysterious letter in 2013. While nothing had been proven, there was a sense that their disappearance was not fully resolved. Family members recalled the night when they went missing as cold and quiet, with no obvious signs of chaos. If the Anglin brothers survived, they did not just get away from a prison meant to crush them mentally. They vanished from the sight of guards, the grasp of the law, and even from historical records. By doing this, they became a story. Two siblings who showed that determination, trust, and the desire for liberty can overcome even the toughest obstacles. Let's look into how the escape was made without them being caught. The night they slipped into the bay. After months of carefully planning and building in secret, Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers achieved the impossible. They made it to the upper level of Alcatraz without getting caught. However, their toughest obstacle was yet to come. It wasn't inside the walls of the prison, but in the icy and treacherous waters of San Francisco Bay. The bay was inhospitable. The water was extremely cold, around 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and the currents were strong enough to drag down even the most powerful swimmers. It wasn't a quick swim. It was nearly 2 miles to the closest land, Angel Island. This is why many thought that Alcatraz was impossible to escape from. The prison wasn't just situated on solid ground. It was encircled by a moat of freezing, flowing water that appeared endless. Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers were well prepared. They did not just dig through concrete or crawl through tunnels. They also secretly planned for this stage of their escape. They used stolen raincoats to create something unexpected in a prison, a makeshift raft. They also made life vests, carefully considering every aspect to safely navigate the long and perilous journey ahead. They built their raft meticulously by assembling it piece by piece. The raft was approximately 6 feet in length and 4 feet wide. They sewed the raincoats together using thread they obtained from the prison's workspaces. To ensure the seams were secure, they melted rubber using the hot steam pipes from the prison's plumbing system. They made sure not to waste anything, collecting all items slowly and covertly. The air pump was ingeniously constructed from an old concertina, a musical instrument repurposed to blow air into the raft. Their paddles were crafted from plywood fragments, most likely gathered during their work assignments. On the evening of June 11, 1962, everything was calm. In the darkness, they went to the northeast part of the island. They blew up the raft and quietly entered the dark water. There was complete silence, no noises, no splashes, no alarms. They vanished into the night, leaving only quietness. Over the next few days, the mystery surrounding the disappearance continued to deepen. The Coast Guard discovered a paddle floating in the water on June 14th. Also on that day, a sealed package containing personal items of the Anglin brothers was found. A week later, fragments of the raft were found near the Golden Gate Bridge. Soon after, a homemade life vest, damaged from the sea, was also found. Despite these discoveries, there was still no sign of the missing men. Some thought the people had passed away by drowning. The warden of the prison believed the cold water and strong currents were the cause. However, not everyone agreed with this theory. The design of the raft, the careful planning, and the timing of their escape indicated a different outcome. Experts later suggested that if they had launched the raft at the correct time, with favorable tidal conditions, they could have successfully crossed to the other side. But could there have been another participant in the escape plan? Let's find out. The one who stayed behind. Allen West was planning to take part in one of the most adventurous escapes in American history. He was closely involved in the famous Alcatraz prison break plan with Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers. Having been imprisoned at Alcatraz since 1957, he developed strong relationships with the others due to spending time together in prison and having neighboring cells. With determination, the four men spent months getting ready for an unprecedented task: breaking out of Alcatraz. West played a significant role in the plan, carefully focusing on each step. He worked diligently on chipping away at the wall behind his sink, along with the others. He assisted in collecting stolen items like raincoats, tools, and bits for fake heads to deceive the guards. He was fully committed and not just aiding in the escape, but also constructing his path to freedom. However, on the night of June 11, 1962, everything was supposed to change. This was the time they had been waiting for, the moment for escape after meticulous planning. Each escapee began opening the holes in their walls, entering the dark corridor one by one. Unfortunately, Allen West encountered a problem. The hole he had carefully crafted was slightly too small for him to fit through, a small mistake that proved to be crucial. He attempted to repair it. He used a variety of tools to try to remove the remaining concrete. However, time was limited. The rest of the group couldn't delay any longer. If they did, they might get caught before escaping. Reluctantly, Morris and the Anglin brothers left West behind in his cell and proceeded through the tunnel. The following day, they found out about the escape. The guards were surprised and sounded alarms. Allen West, the only one remaining, realized the plan had been uncovered. He decided to be honest and spoke openly to the authorities, revealing all the details: the tunnels, workshop above the cell block, homemade raft, and their destination to Angel Island. His honesty provided investigators with a clear understanding of the events of that night. Some people thought that the rest of the group may have altered their planned path because they were afraid that West would reveal information. There was no evidence to support this, but the fact that none of the escapees were ever located kept suspicions alive. Allen West did not get to escape by raft because he did not make it to the water. He did not fear chasing freedom, but a small mistake kept him in his cell. The closure of Alcatraz in 1963 led to him being transferred and serving out his sentence. The letter that brought the past back. It had been over 50 years since three men escaped from Alcatraz in 1962 and disappeared into the waters of San Francisco Bay. People have been wondering what happened to them all these years. Did they pass away, or did they make it out alive? The story became famous, and in 2013, the mystery was reignited when a letter claiming to be from one of the escapees, John Anglin, appeared at the San Francisco Police Department. The letter was brief, yet impactful. It mentioned that all three men had escaped that night, but it was a close call. The letter stated that Frank Morris had passed away in 2005, Clarence Anglin in 2008, and now John Anglin was reaching out from a hiding place, elderly and severely ill. He expressed his readiness to turn himself in, but only if he could receive medical assistance. The unexpected message grabbed the FBI and other law enforcement agencies' attention. The case had appeared to be closed for many years with no proof that the men were still alive or clues as to their whereabouts. However, the letter reignited the case and prompted investigators to launch a new, quiet investigation to uncover the truth. The letter was examined thoroughly by experts in an attempt to determine if it was written by John Anglin and the others. Handwriting analysis, fingerprint checks, and DNA testing were conducted, but unfortunately, no conclusive evidence was found. The handwriting did not perfectly match known samples. There were no viable fingerprints found. The DNA evidence was inconclusive, leading to a dead end in the investigation. However, the letter was not easy to ignore. It did not seem like a joke and was not completely unbelievable. It provided enough information to appear plausible and sincere. It did not solve the case, but also did not completely disregard the possibility. It continued to keep the enigma ongoing. Until 2018, many people were unaware of the letter. It was only after a local CBS station covered the story that it gained attention. The public began discussing the letter once again. The letter, along with rumors and claims from the family, reignited interest in the legend. The Anglin family had claimed to have received Christmas cards from the brothers for years. Some people believed a 1973 photo showed John and Clarence living in Brazil. However, there was no concrete evidence to prove or disprove these claims. The letter brought hope to those who thought the escape was possible. It mentioned peaceful years spent traveling and living in hiding. If it was true, it meant their escape plan had been successful. The raft had taken them to safety. The men had disappeared, not into the ocean, but into society. The U.S. Marshals, who are still responsible for the case, did not overlook it. In 2022, they unveiled new images depicting how the escapees might appear now. Older and altered, they continue to seek tips and hope for the key information that could resolve the mystery. Some authorities think the men may have passed away, while others believe there are too many unresolved elements and unanswered questions. This letter is important, not only because it could be authentic, but also because of the message it conveys. In today's world, where surveillance is widespread and information is hard to keep hidden, it's difficult to believe that someone could vanish without a trace. However, this letter tells a story that suggests it may have happened. It prompts people to consider the possibility. It brings to mind other unresolved mysteries, such as the mysterious D.B. Cooper case, or the legendary tales of outlaws in the Wild West. People are fascinated by stories of individuals outsmarting the system, where freedom can be achieved even in a seemingly restrictive environment. Ultimately, whether the letter from 2013 was authentic or not doesn't diminish its impact on the world. It reignited a story that is still ongoing. Apart from the letter, were there other leads on the escapees? Clues in the shadows. The day after the well-known escape from Alcatraz in 1962, something strange occurred. A man who said he was John Anglin called a lawyer named Eugenia McGowan in San Francisco. He asked her to arrange a meeting with the U.S. Marshals, but when McGowan declined, he hung up without saying anything else. This short call added to the mystery. Around the same time at 1:00 a.m. on June 12th, a San Francisco police officer named Robert Checky saw something unusual. He noticed a small boat floating in the bay near Alcatraz without permission. Shortly after, the boat vanished into the dark night, going under the Golden Gate Bridge. Some thought it might have been someone helping the prisoners escape, but the FBI did not think this sighting was important and decided to overlook it. In 1993, a man who used to be in Alcatraz prison named Thomas Kent appeared on the TV show America's Most Wanted. He said he had assisted in planning the escape and even said he knew who was going to meet the escapees. According to Kent, Clarence Anglin's girlfriend was supposed to pick them up and drive them to Mexico. Kent did not take part in the actual escape because he couldn't swim. However, the authorities did not believe his story, especially since he was paid for the interview. In that year, a man named John Leroy Kelly confessed on his deathbed. He told his nurse that he and someone else picked up the escapees in a boat and went all the way to Seattle. Instead of helping them reach Canada, he said they executed them for the $40,000 their families had gathered. Investigators found nothing when they searched the location where Kelly claimed the bodies were buried. The TV show Mythbusters conducted an experiment in 2003 to see if it was possible to escape from Alcatraz using a homemade raft. They used materials similar to what the prisoners would have had and were able to reach the marine headlands opposite the island. They confirmed that it was indeed possible to escape from Alcatraz. In 2003, a documentary by National Geographic exposed additional information about the escape. A raft was discovered on Angel Island the day following the escape, with footprints close by. On that very day, a blue Chevrolet was stolen in Marin County. Adding to the suspicion, a driver in Stockton claimed that 3 men in a blue car had deliberately run him off the road. All of these hints create an intriguing image that continues to keep the mystery of the Alcatraz escape unsolved. When science met the sea. For a long time, the common belief was that Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers attempted to escape from Alcatraz but were unsuccessful. The prison was surrounded by icy, swift waters, making it nearly impossible to swim across the bay. It was widely thought that the men drowned in June 1963 during their escape attempt. This theory was so widely believed that the FBI officially closed the case in 1979 and declared the escapees dead. However, as time went on, individuals began to raise inquiries. The narrative seemed unresolved. Advancements in technology, innovative concepts, and continuous inquisitiveness started to unveil the truth behind what possibly occurred. Researchers from the Netherlands utilized computer simulations in 2014 to examine the tides during the escape night, offering a fresh perspective on the old tale. They made an important discovery. If the men had set off on their raft between 11 p.m. and midnight, the water currents could have taken them safely to Angel Island, which is about 2 miles from Alcatraz. This aligns with the generally accepted time frame for the escape. The water conditions were previously thought to be a major obstacle for the escape plan, but now scientific evidence suggests that it could have facilitated their journey like a road, if they timed it right. This recent study altered the opinions of many regarding the case. While the computer simulations did not confirm the survival of the men, they did make it challenging to definitively say they did not. The possibility of their escape now seemed viable rather than just a risky scheme. It's believed that factors like timing, weather, and currents, which the men couldn't manage, may have worked in their favor. That was not the sole clue. Additional evidence included a paddle, personal items belonging to the men, and fragments of the raft being discovered shortly after the escape. Additionally, in 2013, a puzzling letter surfaced, suggesting that the men had been in hiding for many years. The timing of this letter coincided with a Dutch study, making it difficult to disregard as a hoax. The plan to escape was very detailed. Every step was planned out meticulously. They made life vests, built a raft, and made fake heads to trick the guards. They were thoughtful and prepared. If anyone could succeed in escaping, it would be them. Some in law enforcement believe that the escaped prisoners drowned, but others think that Frank Morris and the Anglins might have successfully disappeared. They speculate that the escapees could have planned their escape carefully, including living a quiet life afterwards. Perhaps they did not drown in the ocean, but instead started a new life somewhere else. The case is still unresolved. In 2022, new pictures were shared by the U.S. Marshals showing how the men may appear today. The search is ongoing. People are still curious. The Alcatraz escape tale is not only about 3 guys escaping from prison. It's about pushing boundaries and testing limits. It's about waiting, bravery, and the belief that the unthinkable could be possible. Even if the exact truth is unknown, this escape shows us that perseverance can overcome difficult obstacles. It also proves that faith can carry us through challenging situations. Outro. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.